violence in South Sudan spawns a major humanitarian crisis. We'll look at a South African entrepreneur's quest to bring solar electricity to the continent. And what was once a rarity is now a growing trend. Lavish weddings are back in Gaza. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidu-Ewart. This is Africa 54. Voting in local elections is ongoing in South Africa Wednesday, and the nation's ruling African National Congress Party could lose major cities in the balloting, including its locations it has held a firm grip on since the end of white minority rule more than 20 years ago. According to recent polling, the economic hub of Johannesburg, Pretoria, and Nelson Mandela Bay, the East Coast could all fall to the main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance. Opinions on the elections are wide-ranging.
I don't take voting seriously, and that's the way I am. When people speak and all that, nothing comes to my senses because I know things are the same. We are going to vote for them. They are driving big and top cars. They do this and that. They stay in big houses. What about us? What do we gain after voting? We gain nothing.
I will continue to vote for ANC. The party is fine, and if Zuma is not right, the party will remain fine. I am ANC always until the coming of Jesus Christ.
We are going to take BE, we are going to take Tshwane, we are going to take Johannesburg, we are going to take Ekurhuleni, and all the big metros. We are going to shock a lot of people in eThekwini municipality.
The popularity of President Jacob Zuma has slipped. The ANC's leader survived an impeachment vote in April after the Constitutional Court said he breached the law by ignoring an order to repay some of the $16 million in state funds spent on renovating his home. The president of South Sudan has sacked 6 ministers allied to former first vice president and rival Riek Machar. The firing late Tuesday by Salva Kiir draws threats of more fighting between the government forces of Kiir and those loyal to Machar. President Kiir filled the vacant posts with people linked to a breakaway faction of Machar's SPLM-IO party. Meanwhile, South Sudan is facing a massive humanitarian and displacement crisis, with thousands of refugees fleeing to neighboring countries and many becoming internally displaced. The UN Refugee Agency has reported that the number of South Sudanese refugees fleeing to Uganda over the past 10 days has doubled to more than 52,000 since fighting erupted 3 weeks ago in Juba between the government and rebel forces. Those arriving in Uganda have reported that a variety of armed groups, some allied with the government and others with rebel forces, and still others seeking to profit from the chaotic situation, have been preventing people from leaving South Sudan.
Refugees have also reported that armed groups operating across different parts of South Sudan are looting villages, murdering civilians, and forcibly recruiting young men and boys into their ranks.
The displacement and health situation inside South Sudan is even worse. The United Nations reports more than 1.6 million people are internally displaced, and an estimated 4.8 million people are short of food.
South Sudan has 3 main causes of death, in fact, epidemiologically speaking. Malaria first, respiratory infection second, and cholera third. We have also seen a lot of cases of malnutrition. Unfortunately, what we know is there are many cases of malnourished children, and the situation now remains very precarious.
Another 1,000 have fled to Kenya, bringing the number of South Sudanese refugees in that country to 7,000. The latest upsurge of refugees has brought the overall number of South Sudanese refugees to nearly 900,000 since the civil war broke out in December 2013. The escalating violence has put the fragile ceasefire agreement hatched last August between South Sudanese President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar on life support, along with the recently formed unity government. In the war on terrorism, Italy's defense minister says the European nation would most likely allow the use of its air bases and airspace for strikes against Islamic State militants in Libya if the United States asks. Roberta Pinotti's statement came during a testimony Wednesday to Italy's lower house of parliament. American warplanes began bombing Islamic State targets in Libya on Monday at the request of the UN-backed government in Tripoli to help push militants from their former stronghold of Sirte. Now, for more on the situation in Libya, joining us via Skype is Carla Bab. Carla, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Carla, the UN-backed government of National Accord has difficulties imposing its authority and even winning backing from factions in eastern Libya. Give us an update on the latest on the U.S. strikes there.
Well, as this operation is continuing, there have been about 8 U.S. strikes in support of the forces aligned with the government and National Accord. That's the UN-backed government in Libya. There were 3 yesterday, according to a Pentagon official. He said that one of the ones was hitting an excavator, another one hit a rocket launcher, and a third strike hit this big truck that had a big, massive gun that was strapped on the back of it. Then there were 5 on Monday. Those 5 on Monday, when the strike started, hit 2 tanks, hit 2 construction vehicles, and then also hit an Islamic State fighting position.
And Carla, why the U.S. airstrikes now?
Well, that's a great question, because there have been fighting, there's been ongoing fighting for months between Islamic State fighters and these forces. But the United States puts it this way. They go, they've been successful so far. They've pretty much taken the territory all the way from Tripoli to Benghazi and reduced the Islamic State's control to this city center of Sirte. And so the United States is going to help them get across the finish line, because there's been some problems in Sirte. One of those tanks that I was telling you about has been called a menacing problem. It was in an area where they were hitting civilians with that tank, and the forces, with the support of the Libyan government, would move forward, and then they'd get pushed back by the Islamic State thanks to that tank. So by the U.S. forces coming in and taking out that one piece of equipment that had been pushing and stopping all of these forces, the forces are already in that part of Sirte now and continuing to push against the Islamic State. And, you know, aside from that, the President of the United States just said yesterday that it's in the U.S. national security interest to make sure that the Libyans finish their job against Islamic State in Libya, because the United States is not just fighting the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. It's also fighting in Afghanistan, Libya, and wherever the Islamic State rears its head.
And Carla, do we know how long this is going to continue?
Well, Pentagon officials say that this is a very finite mission, that the United States has been authorized to conduct these strikes in and around Sirte to help the Libyan forces that are aligned with the government push the Islamic State out of that particular stronghold. They say it's expected to take weeks, not months.
And do we know, Carla, how does this actually compare to the previous airstrikes in Libya?
Well, the previous airstrikes in Libya were targeting these high-value Islamic State targets. So they weren't on the request of the Libyan government. They were done by the United States to take out specific Islamic State fighters that they deemed worthy to take out. Now they've got the Libyan government asking for these strikes in support of a specific operation as the Libyan forces aligned with this government are pushing Islamic State out. So it's a very different situation.
No, thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you.
Carla Bab is a VOA correspondent at the Pentagon, reporting there live via Skype. In Wednesday's business report, we are looking at the African Passport, a flagship project of the continent Agenda 2063. Could we possibly see the United States of Africa? And with more on the economic impact the free movement could have on the continent, Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino joins us via remote from our New York studios. Jill, how are you today? And tell us the latest.
Hi, doing well today, Esther. Thank you. The first passport was issued in July to the African Union president, which is interesting considering the amount of attention Brexit and the future of a unified European Union has been getting. Africa's Agenda 2063 has several major components, but the most common themes in the framework are trade, prosperity on a global scale, and political unity. People who hold a United States passport or a passport from many European countries can travel around Africa with more ease than Africans themselves. The need for visas has a heavy impact on frequent intra-African travelers, such as business people and entrepreneurs. Having to make countless visits to embassies, submit paperwork, and wait for approval can waste days and, in many cases, help lose sensitive deals.
You know, it looks like a very interesting phenomena here where most Africans would like to have this free passport, but I would imagine there would be some hesitation and also obstacles in implementing a universal passport. What's your take?
Sure. Yeah. The publication African Business did some interesting analysis on this. The concept of one African passport may be highly appealing in theory, but the challenge of getting 54 unique African states to agree on the implementation of this plan is tremendous. Just like with Brexit, the biggest issue with the universal passport will be the human factor. The notion of seamless borders raises the all-important concern of terrorism, so the introduction of a common African passport will undoubtedly be a drawn-out and complex journey, with migration and refugee policies needing to be reassessed before any implementation can happen.
You mentioned seamless borders, but, you know, when you look at that kind of focus and the effort being made by certain countries in East and Western Africa, you know, is there any evidence really to support this is really working?
There are many studies from groups like the IMF, World Bank, and Trademark East Africa that show countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda are benefiting from progressive reform. Building business competitiveness, particularly for export markets, and exports are key. They must involve governments and trade support institutions working with private sector and supporting competitiveness with a coherent strategy. African countries have historically led in isolationist and protectionist policy, and this is one of the main reasons why many countries still have a weak economy. A more liberal and open economic policy will generate greater growth for African countries and expanding exports, and this is for any country globally, within the 54 states and abroad is the key here.
So, Jill, what do you see as maybe the main challenge ahead in really getting this underway, to be able to have free movement of people and to be able to do trade with each other within the continent?
Right. The biggest obstacle is going to be that you do have 54 different states that have to come together socially and politically. But I think if they can do that, and again, the term is over the next few decades, and this is going to be the biggest story that we're going to be following in business. If you can get the political and social variables out of the way, you can certainly open up trade across the borders. And that's why we always talk about countries like Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, when we're looking at positive trends that are happening on an economic scale. So if we can get past the human factor here and you can open up and cross borders, that is what's going to grow the export market. You'll have to import less, and that is how you expand an economy.
I imagine this is quite an ambitious effort. It's something that a lot of Africans are looking forward to, but as you say, there are some challenges ahead. Well, thank you so much, Jill. Jill Malandrino is Africa 54 business correspondent reporting live from New York. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, a South African entrepreneur efforts to deliver clean energy projects to electrify the continent. Stay with us.
Green Beat for a healthier planet.
Harnessing the power of the wind may be a worthy goal, but it can also be expensive for a single household. Brothers Arun and Anup George, though, say they have a low-cost turbine that will soon be for sale in India.
We're targeting to make this available at around 50,000 rupees per kilowatt.
That's Arun, who is CEO of Avant-Garde Innovations. He says given the turbine's low cost, about $750 and its 20-year lifespan, the electricity it produces will be practically free. For Father Nicholas Pulavila, though, it's more than that. A wind turbine was recently installed at the Madre de Deus Church on the west coast of India.
We have to hear what the Pope says. And now he is speaking about the green energy.
According to the World Bank, a quarter of the households in India have no access to electricity. For the households that do, more than 70% of power comes from coal. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
In the United States, women make up about 18% of the total police force, and some experts would like to see more women in uniform. But the job has its challenges. In this week's One-on-One with Peter Clotty, Peter talks with retired detective Norma Roman Castillo.
Detective Ramon Castillo, if I may ask you, what made you go into law enforcement?
I was working with the communications division as a civilian, and I worked among police officers. I took emergency calls. I went to my supervisor and I asked them if I could go to the police academy and give it a try, and if I didn't like it, could I come back? And he said, sure. I said, okay. So I went ahead and went to the academy, and that was quite an experience.
Now, you weren't trained, you were a former model. How were you able to handle the rigors of, you know, shooting and handling the physical activity that you were not used to?
It was hard, but I was determined to do it. I was determined.
You were in the police force now. What were some of the instances that you dealt with as a police officer?
Back then, they really didn't look at females in law enforcement like we belong. You know, they thought that, oh no, they have no business here. They need to, you know, be at home and be mothers, housewives. They didn't think that was a place for us. Mm. But I proved them wrong.
How did you prove them wrong?
Well, every time that they needed my assistance, I was there, very professional. I took care of business. I had their back, and they had the message.
So I understand you used to come home full body armored, and you will be cooking. Take me through that process. On a regular day, you go to the office, come home, become a mother and a wife. Take me through the process.
Well, after I got home, I just put my purse down and walked straight to the kitchen and start cooking. After a long day at work.
Take me to being a mother as a police officer, and you hear instances of children being killed as a result of a stray bullet and all that. How does it feel?
Wow. I had this young teenager died in my arms, and that was very difficult.
How did it happen?
I responded to a call, and when I got on the scene, I found him laying on the sidewalk, and he was still alive. And I called for help, and I was the first one on the scene, so I was trying to, you know, hold him, and it just, it was difficult.
So, would you encourage anybody, a minority at that, to go to the police force in D.C.?
Yes, definitely.
Why?
I love my career. I love my job. It's just, wow, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's a great experience. You have to wear many hats. You're supposed to be a counselor. You're supposed to be a friend. It's just unbelievable. And people look at you like you can do anything.
It's time now to continue our series on profiles on the 2016 Washington Mandela Fellows. For most of the world, energy and light is given. Africa, however, remains conspicuously dark. Yali Fellow Adele Boazo, a South African native and electrical engineer, plans to change that. As the founder of the energy non-profit Hope Rises Solar, she is driven by her grandmother's memory in the quest to bring solar electricity to Africa. Adele spent her summer at the University of California Davis Energy Institute and is now ready to light up her homeland.
So for me, access to electricity is a basic right, and everyone on the planet and on this continent should have this. The number is 600 million people that is without any access. There's no lamp, nothing at all that's electricity related. My name is Adele Boajo. I'm a Mandela Washington Fellow at UC Davis's Energy Institute. So my paternal grandmother lived in rural Ghana. She was a community leader in her village. She was a strong woman. She was a real pillar. So one day she was cooking and she was using a gas stove. So she switched it on, walked away and came back and lit a match. She burnt and she died in hospital a few days later. Women like her were really leaders, really inspired me to just focus on empowering women in rural areas, women like my grandmother who had so much potential to do so many things, and women who I grew up around. And so that inspired me to start Hope Rises Solar. So the Mandela Washington Fellowship so far has had a profound effect on me in the sense of I don't feel like I'm alone in this battle, in this struggle to bring light to the continent. There are 24 other fellows here who have the same vision. The vision is to see our continent develop, to see our continent grow, and that really fuels me. And when I go back, I can talk about all the other leaders on the continent who are doing similar work. The experience at UC Davis Solar Farm was a wonderful experience. As someone developing solar projects in South Africa, I can really picture that. So when I think of Africa's solar resource, it's just amazing to think of what we could do if we had all the right systems in place. On the continent, we have enough solar irradiation on one day from Africa that could be used to power the world for a year. So we visited the Plant Sciences and Environmental Center for UC Davis at Lake Tahoe. It's been really important to learn how UC Davis has used their resources to document the entire life cycle of Lake Tahoe in terms of all the changes it has gone through in the environment and the species, and it really drives the importance of doing the same thing back with the resources we have in South Africa. In Lake Tahoe, the group went to a group of trees where we measured the carbon sequestration. So I was using a device in between the trees that can be used to measure the altitude and the slope. So carbon sequestration is very important in the South African context, especially because 85% of our electricity is generated from fossil fuels, which means we're the top 20 emitters in terms of carbon emissions. So this is one area we need to target in our country. All right, I see. Think of the beauty of this experience and the rich relationships I've built, and I'm so excited to go back to South Africa and really make a difference and use everything I've learned to make a difference. So I'm going to keep climbing this mountain and keep fighting this battle for access to energy for Africans all across the continent. I do believe I have the ability to change the world, because I think changing the world starts one small step at a time.
Now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, lavish weddings are back in an unexpected place. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Africa, citizens wait in cold weather and long lines to cast their votes in municipal elections, a crucial test for the ruling ANC ahead of the national elections in 2019. In South Sudan, tens of thousands of people are displaced by the recent fighting in Juba and Wau, and still face severe food shortages and malnutrition. In Libya, troops continue to battle against the Islamic State for the control of Sirte. Finally, in Kenya, hundreds of Uber drivers go on strike to protest against recent fare cuts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They tell you what people are talking about. So for an in-depth look at the stories trending high on social media, turn to #VOA. It's not your typical talk show. From politics to pop culture, #VOA brings in the people leading the conversation, engages the audience, and gets answers to your questions. #VOA. Smart talk for smart people.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Lavish weddings have re-emerged as welcome celebrations amid the difficult daily existence in the Gaza Strip. For many, the family gatherings are a chance to forget the hardships caused by Israel and Egypt's blockade of the territory. These kinds of celebrations were once a priority in Gaza. Well, once a reality in Gaza, before the Palestinian Authority took control of the territory in the mid-1990s, weddings were often quiet affairs. But since that time, weddings have become a focal point in the lives of both well-off and poor Gazans. Next up, the craft beer trend has led to an increase in the number of beers on offer in bars. With so much competition for customers, breweries are commissioning unusual beer tap handles to grab the attention of customers. Cone heads, zombies, beards, and bananas are among the decorative handles craft beer makers are using to catch the eye of the thirsty. According to the Brewers Association, there were over 2,000 craft breweries in the United States in 2011, compared to over 4,000 last year. Staying in the bar at the Gin Tub in Brighton, on Britain's south coast, it's impossible for guests to receive calls or push notifications on their phones. The place has become a mobile dead zone to encourage conversation among its customers. The owner of the Gin Tub built a metal shield that repels mobile signals to allow customers to have a distraction-free drink. A number of other bars, cafes, and restaurants around the world have applied similar methods to encourage people to stash away their mobile phones and fully engage with the people around them. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords. Listen to this report about the Ebola virus in Africa.
The speaker is American Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield. She is talking about two African leaders who could not come to Washington for talks.
We understand what they're doing and why they had to make the tough decision not to come to Washington, but to stay at home and address this critical problem.
The word critical has several different meanings.
In our story, critical means very serious or important. Critical can also mean a turning point for something. For example, a battle could be a critical point in a war, when one side takes the lead.
Now, when you hear the word critical, you will know what this newsword means.